Okay, I'm also going to send you the screenshots to make sure that you've got what we're actually doing. Okay, so just a second, I'm sending you the screenshots.
Miss, you still didn't add my number to the group.
I actually am not the admin, and I did ask um, sir to do it, but I think he overlooked that message, so I'll just forward it to him separately. If
Okay.
I was the admin, I would have done it. I'm so sorry. I'll
No, no,
forward it.
no.
Okay, I've done that. I forwarded the text, so probably soon you will be added. Right now, we're just starting with the research design. So before we get started with the material itself, there's when you look at the topic, it says sociology research methods. So that's primarily what we'll be discussing in this is that sociologists figure out a lot of things in the sense that they have a lot of theories, they have a lot of perspectives, and then they test those theories and then they test those perspectives and then they come to a conclusion whether something exists in society, whether their perspective has some ground, whether they're just it's pointless, or whether there's other things that support their idea or support their theory. Okay, so um, right. So because of that, so they have to conduct a research. Okay. So every sociologist or psychologist or philanthropist or scientist, they can conduct a lot of researches. They conduct a lot of studies to find out whether their perspectives and their theories make sense. Okay. And for that to happen, for that process to take place, for them to plan something to for them to conduct a research, they will require a research design. That's potentially the first thing. So when you look at this topic, sociology research method, it is essentially discussing all of the things that a sociologist will need in order to conduct a research, in order to conduct a study, in order to test his or her theory. Okay, so the first thing, we're just going to look at the key terms first. It says bias. Bias, we already know that when something is supporting one side more than the other side, essentially that's what it means. Bias in studies is when people's values and preferences that shape their understanding and actions. Researchers' biases will affect how they conduct research and interpret their findings. So there, this over here, what when they're talking about bias, what they're mentioning is that when a researcher conducts research, when a researcher conducts a study, they have their own preferences, they have their own ideas, they have their own thought process as well. And based on those ideas, preferences, and thought processes, there is a chance that own their whole perspective is going to change, or their study will find certain sorts of results. So for example, if I'm a person who is not in support of let's say diet coke, okay, and I am conducting a research on diet coke, so the bias would lie if I let my own opinion or my personal perspective to affect my research. So my research about diet coke might just be affected by my own opinion about diet coke, and I might just present diet coke in a very negative light just because I myself do not like it. So that would be a researcher bias thing, that I am the researcher and I am presenting bias in the study, I am doing bias in the study and supporting one side rather than the other. That's general terminology that you need to understand. Then we have the control theory, which says the idea that people do not commit deviant acts because various factors control their impulse to break social norms. So they're basically saying when you talk about deviant is when you do not follow the rules of society. So that is basically called deviance. So if I am someone who's living in a society and there is a signal on the road, a traffic signal on the road, and I am not stopping at the red light, I am being deviant. I am not following the rules of the society. So control theory, again, as it says, the idea that people do not commit deviant acts because various factors control their impulse to break social norms. So they're saying that when you talk about control theory, it is centralized on the view that people will not do deviant acts, people will not be deviant, because there is a lot of things that control these impulses for them within society, which obviously we will look at. So what are those factors within society that are controlling that are helping these people control their impulses to be deviant, control their impulses to not listen to the law or the rules or not abide by the law. Then we have hypothesis. Hypothesis is basically as an idea that is tested, okay, in a research. Hypothesis is generally that it's two-tailed, it's one-tailed. So basically, hypothesis is me saying that this is going to happen in my research. That is why I'm conducting my research. For example, I follow through on the same example of Diet Coke. My hypothesis says that Diet Coke is unhealthy for people. Okay, so why now the clash lies between aim and hypothesis. So hypothesis seems like the aim of the study. However, it is not that. So aim of the study, let's say if I'm conducting a study on Diet Coke, my aim is to find out whether Diet Coke is unhealthy or healthy for a person. Whereas my hypothesis is something that I already think is going to happen, something that I am assuming will happen. So hypothesis is presenting an idea that I think will be the result of that particular research that I'm conducting. So whatever I think is going to happen or whatever I think I'm going to find out with this research, that is basically my hypothesis, and that is what I'll be testing with my research. That is the idea that I am testing with my research. I'll give explain this further on when we get to it, but this is just generalized understanding. Interpretivism is something that we've already done. So an approach to research that aims to understand motives and meanings behind behavior. It is particularly associated with collection of qualitative data. So they're basically talking about how they are interpretivism, as we know, is looking at the individual rather than the whole society. So when we look at this from the terminology of research, so what is the aim of an individual to conduct a research, and what are the meanings and research that they're finding on individual basis. This is also something that we'll get into in detail, don't worry. And also we need to always remember that when we talk about interpretivism, we will always focus more on qualitative data, which is subjective data, which is basically words, okay, sentences, paragraphs, subjective data to do with words, not to do with numbers. And then we have positivism, which is an approach to research that is based on scientific method that is particularly associated with collection of quantitative data. So when you talk about positivism, that is more objective because it is based on scientific research, it is based on scientific facts, and because of that it is also quantitative data, it is also to do with numericals, to do with numbers rather than to do with words. Again, we will get into the details of this. Response rate is something, just how many responses you're getting to a questionnaire or your research, etc, etc. So do you have any questions from the key terms?
No, no questions.
Amazing. So research design, so important decision. Every researcher has to make a series of decisions about how best to approach their chosen subject. Every decision they make will have consequences, and the researcher will almost certainly have to make compromises to account for not only practical problems but also the consequences of their findings. For example, the cost involved, the amount of time and availability to complete the project. Ultimately, a good research project is one that is fit for purpose. So they're basically talking about that you have to make a lot of important decisions when you're conducting a research. You need to make sure what you're looking for. You need to make sure what your subject is. More than that, you need to make compromises with your timings. You need to make compromises with your availability, and you need to have a set schedule. So there's a lot of valid and important things that you need to do and decisions that you need to make before you conduct a research. So Martin suggested 6 key decisions that a researcher has to make. So Martin basically said that there are 6 key decisions that a researcher will have to make when they're conducting a research. The first is, does it really matter whether the research takes place? In other words, is it worth doing? Will it add something of value to our knowledge of the social world? Second is, can it be done? Is there enough time to complete the work? Are the resources available, or can you gain access to people, events, or documents that you wish to study? Are the right things being included? So that's the third one. Will the researcher cover all the issues? Will it be possible to make generalizations based on the research outcomes? Will there be an adequate response rate? Response rate again means however many people are involved in this research, however many people are responding to this research or this survey or this questionnaire. Then the fourth one is, will the research produce true and valid findings? Will there be enough detailed and accurate data based on truthful responses? these are again answer questions that the researcher essentially has to answer before he or she conducts a research. Fifth one is, will the researcher provide a fair and balanced picture? How will the researcher avoid bias? Perhaps by now, so we have already discussed what bias is, how will they prevent it? And then the sixth one is, what about the rights and feelings of those affected by the research? How will the researcher deal with the various ethical issues involved? Now, there is a certain series of ethical issues, mainly six, that will be discussed in this chapter only. And those are the ones that the researcher cannot break. So they have to abide by those ethical considerations. So we will return to some sort of these decisions later, but to start at the beginning of the process, we need to understand how to formulate appropriate aims and hypotheses. So as I said, aims and hypothesis is the first step of the research, and they often clash. However, we just need to understand them once really clearly in order to make sure that when we are conducting our own research or writing about our own research, we make sure that we do not clash any of these hypotheses and aims. So Pat Carlin, they have given us a sample aim over here. She is explaining her aim. And so she's saying, my research is based on oral histories of 39 women's criminal careers. The bulk of the book is ethnographic analysis of their law breaking and the official response to it. The analysis was informed by control theory. This theory asks, why do people conform? And it replies that people are more likely to conform when they perceive that they have a vested interest in doing so, when they have to lose more they have to lose more than gain by law breaking. So basically what's happening over here is that Pat Callan is a sociologist who is giving a sample aim, whose sample aim is given over here. And within that aim, what she's trying to find is, even though we do not need to know what she's trying to find, but to just to have a clearer perspective, she's saying that the aim of a study, the goal, basically the goal of a study or the aim of the study, why she is conducting the study, is because she wants to see why do people conform. And based on the control theory, she is saying that people conform when they have this cost benefit analysis, where they see that they will have to face more cost by breaking the law rather than more benefit. And there are some situations where they will get more benefit by breaking the law rather than more cost. So that is basically why they conform or not conform, but basically more towards conform. So that is her aim, and that is the goal that she is basically finding, right? So the second paragraph is that's exactly what they're talking about, that when you read this whole aim, can you actually signify or can you mark what is actually being employed, or what statement is actually the aim, or what is her objective. So it includes women, it includes crime, it definitely includes a lot of qualitative data which is to do with words, because you obviously will be asking these women why they conform. So that's exactly what it means by aim, that you tell the when you start your study, so it has to be the first thing that you do when you have your research, that you will just declare that the aim of your research or the goal of your research is this. So like Pat Callan said, that her goal is to find out why people conform. Similarly, our goal could be based on any of our research, and which is the aim of our study. So that's one thing. Moving ahead, then we have the second thing, which is the relevant hypothesis. Okay, now all present day sociologists have the benefit of drawing upon previous research, testable theories, and explanations. Relevant hypotheses are predictions based on prior knowledge, an idea that can be tested, either confirmed or rejected on the basis of subsequent research. So when we are looking at hypothesis, when we are setting the hypothesis or declaring a hypothesis, the first thing that we have to do is we have to look at data that has already been that already exists about that certain thing. So for example, if our study is about, let's say, children, okay, so there's already a lot of studies, a lot of data, a lot of theories, a lot of perspectives that already exist based on children, sorry, and the way children act, the way children grow, a lot of theories of children, basically holistically. So that is the first thing that you will look at, that whenever you're conducting a research and you're declaring your hypothesis or deciding your hypothesis, the first thing will always be to look at existing research and what did they find out. So looking at the results of those existing um, theories and researches that are related to your particular topic. So they've given us an example here. They've talked about Fiona Devine, who basically tested the idea of privatized instrumentalism suggested by the earlier work of other sociologists. So it was something that was suggested by earlier sociologists, and she tested that idea. Privatized instrumentalism was the idea for well-off workers, social relationships had become centered on the home, with work only as a means to an end. According to this theory, the so-called affluent workers only joined together with their workmates out of self-interest, for example, to improve their wages, and not because they had communal values associated with traditional working class. In her research, Devine did not find evidence to support the theory. The workers she interviewed still held collective working class values. They did not accept capitalism without reservations, and they continued to resent inherited wealth and class based inequalities despite their own rising living standards. Now, three things to understand here. First of all, the first thing to understand is what were they trying to study here. So they were trying to look at privatized instrumentalism, which basically meant that just give me 1 second.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, yeah, sorry. Right. So I was talking about, yeah, three things that you need to understand here. The first one is privatized instrumentalism, what that basically means. So when we talk about privatized instrumentalism, that is just believing, having this idea that people, affluent workers are basically upper class workers, in the sense managers and operation heads and all of these people. These affluent workers who earn good wealth. They basically do not have any communal values, which basically means that they're not working because they enjoy with their co-workers. They're not working because they believe in the same thing, which is to be against capitalism, but they are working only because they want higher wages, they want a higher status, and they want to go, feed their families and have a good living standard for their families. That is basically what this privatized instrumentalism states, that this is what is happening. And affluent workers do not really care about going against capitalism, and they do not really care about supporting their communal values, supporting the values from where they came from. Okay, that is what they were stating. Okay, and that's the first thing that we know. So now we not need to know what Fiona Devine did. Okay, so Fiona Devine, basically this idea was presented by other sociologists in the past, and she was the one who wanted to test it. So when she was testing it, she said it that yes, it will exist. She said that yes, privatized instrumentalism will exist, because it was primarily because it was a theory that a lot of other sociologists had already suggested. So she felt like, okay, because so many people have already suggested this, and because so many people are saying that it exists in society, it is very much possible that, yeah, okay, it is a thing. Okay, and because of that, she said that yes, it would exist in society, that privatized instrumentalism, which I will test, will exist in society. So she basically declared a result. Okay, third thing, how is where is the explanation for hypothesis? So that is exactly what Fiona did when when she declared that yes, in privatized instrumentalism will exist. That was her hypothesis. So when we talk about aim in this scenario would be to see whether there is privatized instrumentalism within the society, so whether there is or there is not. But when we talk about hypothesis, it is declaring, it is making a statement. It is not testing something, it is making a statement that there will be privatized instrumentalism in society. So that is what Fiona did, and when she tested it, she was proven wrong. So her hypothesis, she tested her hypothesis, she checked if her hypothesis was right, whether she was right, and then she found out no, she wasn't. So her hypothesis test failed, so her hypothesis basically failed. So again, the primary difference between aim and hypothesis is, aim is basically the goal of your study, what you're trying to find, what you aim to find, compared to hypothesis, which is basically you deciding or making a statement that this is what you will find. So making an assumption of what is the thing that you will find, or making an assumption of the theory that you think you will figure out. Make sense to you?
Yes.
Amazing. So moving ahead, we've got pilot studies and scientific methods. So we have already decided, we've already seen all the important decisions that we have to make in a research design, and we've seen the difference between aim and hypothesis, which are the first two steps to our research. The second one, first looking at the key terms, now they're saying informed consent. So when I said that there's going to be 6 ethical issues that we will be looking at, one of them and the most important one is informed consent. What does informed consent mean? That you are asking the participants that you will be conducting a study on them, or that you will be observing that them, or you will be having a survey with them and telling them that this is what it is for. We are, let's say for example, if I'm conducting a study on television, and let's say I'm conducting a study on unhealthy screening on television. Okay, so I am going to say, go to the participants and I'm going to tell them that I am conducting a study on unhealthy screening on television, and I would like your time to, if you could please just fill out this questionnaire, and just tell them that this is the study is a, this is what the study is about. And when they fill out the questionnaire, they know that okay, the questionnaire is about this particular thing. Okay, the study is about this particular thing, and we have asked for their consent that whether they want to do it or not. So they can say yes or no both to them. So that is the first ethical guideline, and that is what informed consent is. The second one is interactionism. So again, we a theoretical perspective that focuses on small scale everyday social interactions. Sorry, so I explained interactionism when I was explaining interpretalism. Okay, interactionism is basically looking at small scale social issues. Okay, everything that happens in day to day life. So for example, driving, sitting, eating, standing up, all of these smaller social issues within the society is interactionism. Looking at individual basis rather than societal basis is interactionism. And observation schedule is a form used to record observations using predetermined categories. So basically, for example, when I wake up, no, before I sleep every single night, I make a checklist. Okay, and the next day I do all of those things and I tick whatever I have done on my checklist. Like, so I tick whatever I've done in my checklist, right? So similarly, when a researcher is conducting an observation, he or she also has a checklist which is called an observation schedule, and then they keep ticking whatever they have already observed. So for example, if I'm observing children in a playground, so I will have an observational checklist, or I will have an observation schedule, and I will put down 4 to 6 pointers that okay, is someone pushing, is he running, is he jumping, is he playing. So if he is doing any of those things, I will keep checking them, and I will basically observe on these bases. Now okay, I'll be like, okay, now I have to see if he's jumping, okay, now I have to see if he's pushing, okay, now I have to see if he's playing. So it's like that. So I have to make sure that I'm observing on the right basis, and I'm observing on the basis of this particular schedule that I've made. Just a sec. Right. So that's one thing. Then this last thing that we need to know is a pilot study. This is something we've discussed before as well. A pilot study is a demo study that you do before you do your actual study. And why do you do it? To make sure that your sample is fine, to make sure your design is fine, to make sure every single thing that you've decided is fine and reliable and valid. So a pilot study is a small scale trial. So even like for example, when you started studying with me, we had a trial class or a demo session. So similar to that, the pilot study is a demo trial or demo session or demo study for the researcher or the sociologist themselves, in order to make sure that everything is on point and they want to go ahead with this. Make sense to you?
Yes.
Amazing. So right, so the first, when you look at pilot studies, it is very directly correlated to planning, and that is what they're talking about, the importance of planning. So pilot studies are simply a rehearsal for the main event, an opportunity for the researcher to try out their chosen methods and iron out all those troublesome problems, etc., etc., etc. So they're basically saying that a pilot study is to make sure that everything is on track, and to eliminate anything that is totally wrong, to eliminate anything that is not on track, to eliminate anything that is incorrect. Okay, so to subtract all of those things would be a part of the pilot study, right? So that is basically a part of planning as well. Similarly, the observation schedule that we just discussed, that is also a part of planning. So every single time someone wants to conduct an observation, they need to make sure that they're having this checklist, they have this schedule based on which they will conduct an observation. So this is also that comes under planning, because this is something that they are doing before they have started to conduct their research, or before they have started to conduct their observation. So that is what they're talking about here, the importance of planning when they're conducting a certain research. Uh, Looking at the scientific method, so pilot studies reflect a pragmatic approach used by positivist researchers. Now, when we talked about positivism, so we looked at what positivism is. So we have positivist research that basically conduct research on a scientific basis, or that basically conduct research on a quantitative basis, which means numerical basis based on scientific facts. They do not conduct researches that are subjective or that are basically to do with, let's say, society in that sense, right? So such scientific research depends on choosing the appropriate research tools and techniques. The aim is to make accurate observations and measurements. If the methods are suitable for the purpose, those observations and measurements will stand up to the scrutiny by other scientists. This process is called peer reviewing. So whatever is do a, what a pilot study is for normal research, there is also peer reviewing for a scientific research. Why is that? Because when you have a scientific research, let's say astronauts are conducting a research, they obviously require a lot more funding, they require a lot more techniques, a lot more tools, a lot more qualifications, a lot more different items and things, right? And based on that, their research will be way different than a normal research. And that is why peer reviewing is required, whereby scientists sit with each other. There's groups of scientists who discuss a study, who discuss anything that they will be doing as a peer, as a group, and they advise one another, and then they basically plan. So peer reviewing is the planning for scientific study or scientific method basically. And this is essentially for positivist research, because researchers, because they are the ones who conduct scientific or in quantitative research. So just a second. So sorry, do we have any questions still here?
No.
Okay, amazing. Then we have the scientist publishes not only the results of their research, but also a detailed account of their method. Other scientists can repeat the research, and if the level and check the level of reliability, unless of course they cannot repeat the results, etc., etc., etc. So they're basically saying that why do scientists do this peer reviewing? Why do they plan on such detailed levels? Is that if they conduct a research, they publish all of those things as well, so that another scientist can work on that, or another scientist. So the another scientist can do two things: a, find an extension. So for example, if let's say Newton introduced the law of gravity, okay, and then he published every single thing, so that if anyone else wants to find an extension to gravity, if anyone else wants to relate it to, let's say, climate change, they can do it in the future. That's one thing. Second thing is so that the another scientist can follow the same procedure, the same steps, and redo the research in order to make sure whether it's reliable or not, whether it was a fake thing or whether it was a reliable thing which can be done again and again and tested again and again. So those are the two reasons why peer reviewing is published, done and published, and to make sure that everything is sorry, sir. Yeah, okay, sir just replied and he is asking. So this is Saleha. It's her personal contact which needs to be funded. Right, okay. So we are done with pilot study and scientific method. So alternative approaches. Right. So the positivist approach to scientific research does not have its limitation, however, when it comes to investigation of human society. For some sociologists, the scientific approach has always represented something of an ideal to which they aspire. Early sociologists, such as Comte and Durkheim, um, believed that by adopting a similar approach to the natural sciences, they would be able to reveal laws that governed human behavior. However, modern sociologists have tended to move away from its assumptions. They no longer spend their time looking for universal laws governing human behavior or developing grand theories that explain everything about society. So the first thing that we need to understand is that positivist approach, like we know it, was something to do with scientific findings, to do with factual knowledge, to do with to do with theories, grand theories, that to do with how nature is causing something. So everything naturally happening was something that was positivist approach. So for example, if you look at the evolution of humans from, let's say, gorillas or monkeys to humans, that would be something that the that would be something that would lie in the positivist approach. So they're saying that positivist approach was really famous and really modernized in the previous years, in the years of Durkheim and Comte, where they said that they should do everything on the basis of these positivist approaches because they make absolute sense. They are factually right. They are scientifically right. Okay, so that is what they believed. However, now in the modernized society, they say that not everything can be proven this way. Not everything can be proven in a natural way. Not everything can be proven by the laws of earth or the laws of gravity and all of those things. So positivist approaches are not that common now, because they believe that these approaches or science cannot define every single thing. So these approaches revolve around science, and now they are not that factual or famous because, again, it is believed that not everything revolves around science. The second part of it is another alternative approach is for the interpretivist sociology. Uh, Approach of interpretivist sociologists, who some of the techniques that are available to the natural sciences are completely unsuitable for their purposes. So they do not believe in they do not believe, but they do not follow through on, let's say, scientific ideas that have been presented. So while in the past some social scientists have attempted such an approach, for the majority of present-day sociologists, the ethical issues raised by such experiments are simply too serious an obstacle. People have rights that make perfect sense from a scientific point of view. May well sorry, I lost myself. Scientific point of view, people have rights that researchers have responsibilities in creating control conditions that may make perfect sense for scientific point of view, may well infringe not only on people's rights, they may even break the law if they result in any harm to participants. Many sociologists have made now recognize that they impact the environment that are researching, and people respond to them based on ethnicity, gender, religious background, sexuality, and even accent. Essentially, it is near impossible to not influence the research process. So now they're saying, so we already understand what the interpretivist is basically not science, not revolving around science, not factual, to do with normal society, to do with asking around people to have a sample and to study that sample. That's basically interpretivist approach. However, they're saying that even with that, there are so many issues now, because the ethical issues or the ethical guidelines do not go in hand with this particular approach. So for scientific approach, when it is based on science, because it is factual and because it is something that is known, the sample knows, people know, there's informed consent, there's confidentiality, there's reliability. But with interpretivist approach, where people are just conducting, or researchers or sociologists are just conducting their research out of nowhere, there they do not exactly have that same flexibility, and they do not have all of the ethical guidelines being followed, which is why it is not very famous holistically. Do we understand this?
Yes.
Okay, now we're just going to look at a few differences between those two in the third paragraph. So, if you approach society from an interpretivist perspective, you are trying to understand how individuals make sense of the social world. So, again, interpretivist approach is basically figuring out interactionism. Okay, so it is figuring out how individuals are affecting the society, not how society is affecting individuals. That is positivist. Okay, so when you talk about interpretivist, or when you talk about, so interpretivist approach goes hand in hand with interactionism. And what is interactionism? That believes that it is the interaction between humans and society that shapes the society, not the society that shapes human interaction. Interactionism does not readily conform to the conventional scientific approach. If you use unstructured interviews as a research method to talk to people about their experiences and feelings, you are exploring a reality that can be created through interactions with them. So, an interview, which is basically a type of experimental design, would be considered interactionist, would be considered something that interpreters would do. Why? Because you are interacting with the particular person, you are interacting with the person responsible, and that is why it is the interpretivist approach, because they also look at society from the basis of interactionism, and that is the method that they will use. It is very different to a laboratory experiment. Humans are aware of the situation. Informed consent must be. So basically, they're saying that this is not something that is scientific, so it's not happening in a controlled environment. It is pretty flexible, it is pretty free, which is why you will have to take informed consent, which is basically asking people if they mind being a part of your study, if they do not mind being a part of the study. You also need to just make sure that you are not revealing anybody's name, revealing anybody's personal background information, and all of those guidelines need to be on point as well. Are we clear till here?
Yes.
Amazing. So looking at key terms for sampling, that's the next thing that we're doing. Before I get into the key terms, we just need to know what sampling is. Sampling is when you're conducting a research or conducting a study. Obviously, you need people to take part in that research or study. And that is basically what sampling is, that you have a sample size. So you take people who will take part in your study and they are your sample. They are the people that you will be essentially studying. So that is your sample size, your sampling tech. So for those people to be collected, there have been a lot of sampling techniques. So sample is again the people that you're using in your study. Okay, sample size is how many people you are using in your study. Sampling technique is how will you basically get these people, collect these people to do your study. So cluster sample is where a subject population group conveniently together in one place. So there's a group of people within a society. So, for example, all brown people, they have been collected together. That's a cluster sample. You have created clusters and you have collected those people together. Quota sample is basically subjects are selected because they represent. So, quota would be different traits based on which there have been quotas created, groups created. So, for example, based on age. So, there's the elderly people, that's one quota of society. There's the younger people, that's another quota of society. Let's say it is on the basis of gender, so male, female, transgenders, there's three quotas, let's say, or maybe many more now, right? So all of these would be quotas of society, and based on this the sample would be collected, that I want one person from each quota. um, then we have random sample, so that's basically collecting a lot of random people. So that's like, for example, in a classroom there's 50 students, I come in and I'm like, you three, you three, you three, let's go. So that's randomly happening, that's randomized. Or basically let's say in a lucky draw, so they will basically give in chits and they will shuffle the chits, pick out one chit, one person is selected, pick out another chit, another person is selected again. Now that is also random sampling. So randomly choosing, randomized sampling. Sampling frame is basically a complete list from which the researcher selects their sample. So basically what you need in your sample. So do you need students? Do you need elderly people? Do you need married people? Do you need women? Do you need men? So that is basically your sampling frame, that all the people that you need. Then we have snowball sample, which is basically each member of a group respondents is asked by a research to recommend someone who is known to them and who is in the similar situation. So for example, if my sample is one pregnant woman, I'm going to ask her to snowball this whole thing and ask her that if you know somebody else who is also pregnant, then they can also take part in the study, because I need pregnant women. And then I will ask the second pregnant woman if she knows someone who is pregnant, and then I will ask her to call her as well. So that is basically snowballing. So having one person and then asking them to snowball your requirements. Then we have stratified samples. Stratified is basically dividing the society or dividing the group into different sections and then choosing randomly from them. So for example, if I have a group of 50 students, dividing them into three groups, and then I am, let's say I'm dividing them into three groups based on genders, and then I am taking randomly taking people from them. Then we have systematic sampling, which is basically, let's say I have a list of 100 people, so I will choose every fifth person. So 1 to 5, fifth one chosen. 5 to 10, 10th one chosen. 10 to 15, 15th one chosen. So every fifth person I'm choosing. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay, sample surveys. Sociologists are often faced with like very large population that they wish to study. It can be impact, so they can't have a very large sample, because obviously they cannot have the whole population. Then they won't be able to collect enough data. So right. The basic principle behind any sample is that it should be representative of the population that is under investigation. Now, this terminology, this term representative, will be coming again and again. So, you need to understand very clearly what it means. So, for example, if I am conducting a study on sick people or ill people, so even if I'm obviously I cannot choose every sick person in the whole world. Let's say I am choosing 25 sick people, but these sick people should be representative of my sick people sample, right? So they should be representative of the sample that I essentially want, or the research that I actually want to have, right? So for example, if I'm having a research on pregnant women, right? So I cannot get all the pregnant women in the whole world, right? That's impossible for me to do. However, even if I'm choosing, let's say, 20 pregnant women, they should represent all of those 20, the other, all of the hundreds of others of pregnant women. Let's say I am conducting a research on highest achievers. I can't have highest achievers through from all over the world. Let's say I have 50 highest achievers, but these 50 highest achievers should represent all of these other higher achievers as well. So my sample needs to be representative of what I'm finding. So if I'm finding a research, let's say my research is based on highest achievers, my sample should represent highest achievers only. Is this clear?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to do sampling frames, and then I'm going to stop before I get into the different types of sampling, even though we have overviewed them, but I'm going to stop there. Uh, Sampling frame is simply a list of everyone in the population being studied. It must be accurate and up-to-date list. Examples of potential sampling frames include school registers, list of residents, or list of company employees. So again, if I am, let's say I'm having a research on on the corporate world, so I need a lot of people from different companies, so that my sampling frame will include those companies from which I will get these people. However, in reality, a suitable list may not exist, or pre-existing list may well be out of date or contain inaccurate information. So for example, you basically do this on the basis of whatever information you have about people, but that information can be inaccurate as well. So for example, if I have information about how many people work in the World Trade Center, okay, but then let's say half of them have now, been fired, or half of them moved away, or whatever, so I still have that old list. So this data can be very inaccurate as well. So it needs to it always has to, you have to make sure that your sampling frame is up to date and it's accurate, and based on that sampling frame you will essentially choose your sample later on. Are we clear till here?
Sure. Yeah. That works there.
Okay, so the next two things are selecting a sample. I have generally talked about this in the key terms and all of them, but we'll just go into a little bit of detail in the next class and just overview them for a bit, and then we will move on to experiments where we will discuss Milgram, and then we will discuss the Stanford Prison experiment. Both of them are very, very, very interesting.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
Perfect.
make sense?
Yeah. Makes sense.
Amazing. So I'll take your class on Sunday because we had to reschedule one of the sociology classes only.
Yes.
So we'll do that on Sunday. We'll connect with the time, okay?
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Allah Hafiz.
Hafiz.